focus on police and you do not focus on the social, political, and economic conditions that create insecurity, you're actually wasting your resources. We have been, effectively mobilized around the banditry, kidnapping as the only source, so that we do not discuss the more fundamental cause of insecurity, which is terrible governance that we have. This governor that is unable to address the basic needs and aspirations of citizens that has led to the kind of insecurity we have had. I think the state police is an avoidance, and given those who should do something about governance the authority not to do anything.
Yeah, I guess it's been a long time coming, just probably, but those are some of the things we're going to focus on here today with Honorable Francis Waive, who is the Chairman, House Committee on Rules and Business. He joins us here in the studios. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, my sister. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so...
Good morning to Nigerians.
All right, so the governor of Gombe State equally weighed in on this matter only yesterday, and he did say that creation of state police will allow the governors to address security issues in their states. And then he also did say that a situation where security agencies and their commands are based elsewhere, not in the state, will not work for the state. So he spoke extensively on some of those matters. And he did say, yes, National Assembly will have to look into those matters now and grant them their wish. So this... And then this comes after there was another report where it talked about, I think, 30 or 36 state speakers have agreed for state police. Yeah. So what is the thinking now for National Assembly?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing that our country, we're beginning to move in this direction. Insecurity has reached a level where everybody has become open to whatever can be a solution. And the general consensus is that when we have it local, it will be more helpful. I'm very excited that even in the National Assembly, unlike previously when there were sharp divisions, some people not wanting state police, some wanting, this time there seems to be a general consensus, especially since the debate on second reading of the Deputy Speaker's bill seeking for the creation of state police, and then the conference that we had about that. Since then, the discussion has been going on and expounding. There has not been voices of dissension at all, except on that day of our summit, where the AIG that represented the IG spoke, talking about the police force not wanting state police. But that apart, every member of parliament seemed to have agreed on this. And I think with the agreement of the state governors, they are very key in this matter, and the state assemblies, because we could pass it in a constitutional review, but the constitution requires that 2/3 of the state house of assemblies must, concur. We could get to a situation like we've seen in some matters in the past, where we make our own recommendations, pass the amendment, and then the state governors twist the House of Assemblies, and we don't get it 2/3. So this is a beautiful development that the governors and the state assembly speakers are already speaking in that same direction. So I see us going to win in this matter. Nigerians are speaking in one voice. Well, local intelligence, local policing.
Well, the governor's bit will come in much later. But how is the National Assembly or you handling the narrative from the police when you just mentioned now them not wanting it? It didn't kind of fit up with a lot of people that are wondering, what's happening here?
Yeah, if you remember that day when that AIG, I've forgotten his name, that presented the IG, when he made that presentation, there was a little bit of an uproar. How can you say this? You know, but the beautiful thing about democracy is that everybody would have their say, but majority will have their way. And the way it's going, the majority is for state policing. We cannot simply continue with a unitary system of policing for our country. We must find solutions to the problems of insecurity. And everyone has agreed. In fact, we see it in our experiences where we come from, where the state police architecture is such that locals are not populating it or are not in charge of it. And even the state governor is the chief security officer of the state, is not also in charge of it. He can fund them, he can give vehicles and all of that, but he cannot really pass out an instruction.
Some of the key concerns, which I believe members of the assembly would have heard a long time ago, is to ensure that the state governors don't become emperors by running their political opponents out of town with this.
Yeah, that's a very clear and present danger. But with the political developments along the line, you know, even in the National Assembly, that issue had come up, that the state governors will use it to do what they like. But the development is going on in such a way that we are reaching a situation with our democracy maturing, that such cases will be few and far between if they happen.
But how can we say that for sure now? Because I don't know which states, somebody remind us, that has conducted local government elections and the party in power did not win 101%.
In fact,
using security agencies.
In fact, we don't have local government elections in our country.
So,
we don't even have local governments anymore.
There you go.
It's a very sad development because that ought to be the closest arm of government to the people. But for the issue of the policing, that is why we are pushing, some of us in the National Assembly, is that this thing should go right on down to local government policing. That's what you find in most developed democracies.
How do you then have local government policing?
No, that's the development. There was a time when we didn't want state police. Now we want state police. We're going to get to the point where we will want local government policing. During this constitutional review...
Isn't that part of what this is supposed to do?
Yeah.
Multi-level policing. You also have federal police who can intervene at some point in the state. You have the state, then you have the local government.
Yeah, federal police should be dealing more with issues that are region, trans-border and all of that. But the state police should be able to deal with local issues. The legislation we are going to bring up when we bring in the amendment to the Police Act is going to be such that the state governments will know the boundaries and the federal government will know the boundary for the federal police. Just like the FBI in the US, they know their boundary as different from what the New York Police Department, for instance, will do. Those are the kind of things we are going to bring up when we, amend the Police Act, because we must do that consequent to the constitutional amendment where we are removing the police from the exclusive list.
It's interesting that you're bringing up the amendment of the Police Act. When we talk about the abuse, the fear of the abuse from governors, the structures in place to stop that sort of abuse happening, to prevent that abuse happening from the state governors, doesn't exist yet. Which is where the kickback against state police comes from. Not from people who want to be able to do whatever they want, no, just from well-meaning, concerned Nigerians. Listen, if, as Chamberlain said, elections at the local levels are not, state INEC in many places are run by the governor. The state assembly, the governor is in charge of it. Local authorities, he puts everybody there. How do you want him to be fair when it comes to state police? How do we know he's not going to be worse? And then the structures to ensure the accountability, to ensure that he doesn't have or she doesn't have the power to do this. No accountability measure is in place yet. And yet we still keep hearing the calls for state police. How do we get those accountability measures in place before we hand over such power to these men?
Yeah, we can't throw the baby and the bathwater away. There actually is a looming danger in that respect. I mean, state governors misusing state police. But we intend to deal with that first by legislation, such that the act, the Police Act, will be amended in such a way that the governors will know their limit. And there will be a point where the National Assembly will be able to come in, where the national police, so to speak, the federal police, will be able to come in. Those are the things we're thinking about.
Help me understand a few of those limits. What kind of limits would you suggest? Just maybe one or two that would stop this governor from being an emperor.
For instance, there are some regulations in place right now that can become a matter of law. During the elections, there's a limitation to which the police can, intervene, security agencies. Now, that's usually in INEC regulations. If you make that a matter of law, it's setting up the state police, then, that brings some form of protection. That is just one of such measures. And we're going to subject this, of course, to public hearing. And civil society is doing a good job. We expect that they will come up with provisions that will help. And Nigerians who are already saying that because of the level of insecurity, that state police is the way to go, they should also come up with such suggestions. We don't claim in the National Assembly to know everything, but we know that the Nigerians have vested in us their power to make laws. And we expect to hear their suggestions on the way to go moving forward. But I've given you some ideas of what we're thinking about.
I mean, we hear you. Of course, there are good sides to the arguments and then the other side to the argument. Would it be a good idea, though, to say, for instance, okay, if you're going to have the state police, they will not participate in elections. Federal police handle all election scenarios. Would that work in any way?
Well, it will to some extent, because if you have done elections before, like some of us have gone through it, security agencies at the local level, even at the national level, they get used by the players. And many times, it's not actually a function of the state. It's a function of corruption. That's usually what happens, a function of corruption. So even at the local government election level, where the governor is in charge of everything, it's also a function of corruption. Because I don't want to be specific. If you allow a policeman to do his job normally, he will do it.
But that's the thing.
But when you influence him...
But will they allow? That's where the concern is. Now, if at the state level, the governors have they have the resources, they control the resources. So what makes us think that they will not deploy that resources for corruption purposes and utilize those security agencies to run everybody else? I said, no, this is my turf. No matter what happens, I'm getting this.
Yeah, that danger is definitely there. But if you look at this level of insecurity we're in right now, we've gotten to a point where the police...
Insecurity is fine. Nobody seems to be complaining about that part.
The police, for instance, is not able to cope. We are bringing in the armed forces, the army and all that. So at the state level, some governors will know that it will be risky to push the patience of Nigerians to some level. You remember in the First Republic, Wide West, we pray we don't get back to a situation where we have democratic backsliding in our country. But I know that the governors know that if they push it to an extent, some people will give them a run for their money. And I think as we develop as a democracy, our people will continue to apply themselves, continue to get involved, continue to own the system, and continue to speak up. And with the benefit of modern technology, information technology, freedom of information, many of these things will gradually get reduced as we move forward.
I mean, we're looking at Plateau State right now. We're taking a look, with what just happened recently. And this has been happening for so long.
Very sad.
Very sad situation. If there was state police, I believe if policing is at local levels, and many Nigerians know this.
Yes.
The problem is the fear of abuse.
Yeah.
And the structures to ensure that that abuse doesn't happen. Until that is put in place, you will still get the skepticism from a lot of Nigerians. But I want you to be able to get your thoughts on the feelers you're getting from these state governors, you just mentioned something very crucial right now, which is that they have to be careful. You don't want to slide into the wild, wild west where people don't even trust the democratic principles anymore.
They must allow protest.
No, yes, you must allow dissenting voices. Yes, you must allow dissenting voices. Yes. Are you getting the feeling that a lot of these state governors are ready to be reined in? Because whatever reforms would be put in place to stop the abuse would hold them down. Do you get the feeling from a lot of these state governors that they're willing to be controlled in this regard?
Yes, especially because if you look at what has happened since '99, when we returned to democracy, things have been changing gradually, not as fast as we want. What the first governors of this democratic Fourth Republic were able to get away with, some governors can't get away with it with them again. So we're developing, and the governors that are there right now won't be there forever. And the new ones coming will know that we are getting to a stage where they can't just do what their predecessors did.
So, Honorable, will it be out of place to say National Assembly to prove to us that they are their own people by saying, okay, since Nigerians are apprehensive and cautious about governors abusing this police, if we give them, put them in charge of police, can the National Assembly say, in order to, if we can't find a way around this, because they seem to circumvent this thing anytime you come up with laws, let's remove immunity for the governors?
I don't think removing immunity from the governors is what will be the solution, because
it's part of the solution.
No, the immunity is not what makes them do what they do, because the immunity only protects them from arrest, and prosecution.
If you know, and all that. If they know that, look, if you do something or you're the one that gave an order for something to happen, you can go into the witness box.
No, you know that most of these orders,
face the music.
Most of such
Instead
orders,
of waiting for 8 years, you gather much more money and then you kill all the evidence.
Most of such orders, really, they don't come out formally. They are really informal, and they are done under the table. So even if you remove immunity and you say you cannot prosecute, you've got to prove again. So but that will not solve the problem.
That's not
removing the immunity. We'll get to a point in our democracy where the immunity will be out. But at the moment, state police cannot be the excuse for removing the immunity, because the immunity is not the reason for the governors doing what they are doing.
How can we say that for sure when we haven't done it? It is, if we do it, then the people will know they can face the music.
I get the fear from them. You know, if you talk about removal of immunity, it means that this governor
can face the music.
Yes, but the governor will probably spend all his time in office going to court and being prosecuted and whatnot.
Is it not a regular?
But
what's wrong with going to court?
Isn't there a way to reduce that level of power that he has? You understand? Because the absolute immunity, it may not be the reason why he does anything, or does the things that he does, but it does enable him. It does enable him to do those things, and we can't say for sure.
You know,
but is there a way to reduce that level of immunity that they have so that they can face the music from time to time on particular issues?
The court is not for the poor man.
If your people are being killed while you are governor, you should be held responsible. You should be able to face the music for that and not just cry, oh, it's so terrible that this is happening to me, help me. No, we should be able to hold you. If you knew that you were going to be held responsible for the lives of those people, you would do everything to keep them alive, no?
Yeah, what you're saying now is the present situation when we have a federal police. By the time we have a state police, they would have no such excuse. That's the truth of the matter.
And this question of
immunity is necessary at this time. Even me as a legislator, there are cases I had in court in my first tenure that are still on till today. I just got a text this morning, for instance, that one of the judges in the High Court in charge of one of my cases has been elevated. So a new judge has come in now, and the case will start de novo. You can imagine a state governor going to court over and over again. It will be distracted completely.
You can't be distracted.
There's nothing wrong with going to court.
If they're distracted, we will see.
There's nothing wrong in going to court.
Let us see first if they will be distracted.
Immunity as the solution.
Let us see first.
I don't think that is the position.
No, you say you welcome people's views.
Yes.
If majority say this is what we want, you give them what they want.
Well, particularly in this 10th Assembly, the Right Honourable Speaker, Right Honourable Tajudeen Abbas, PhD, he has said that this house is the people's house. We must hear the people's opinion. So when we do the public hearing, and the people insist on that. Why not?
Well, Honorable, when he says the people's house, the people are asking, how is the National Assembly earmarking 4 billion now for recreational center, 3 billion for a car park for House of Reps, 3 billion for Senate car park?
It is.
The people are questioning what's going on.
Yes.
10 billion in total for this?
The challenge really is that Nigerians don't understand, the vast majority of Nigerians don't understand how government operates. And many people out there would like to just stigmatize legislators. The truth of the matter is any infrastructural development taking place in the National Assembly is not done by the Assembly, not by the Senate President, not by the Speaker. It's by the Federal Capital Development Authority. They own the premises. They are the people who built it, and any new building going on there, they do all of that.
Is this a fair amount, this amount?
I'm coming.
This 10 billion?
I'm coming. But this is a good story to wipe sentiments against lawmakers. You know, we are the scapegoat. We are those to bear the bonds of anything. Any story about
the one using the facility.
You see. but we are not in charge of that at all. The only thing that can happen from our end is that the committee, the House Committee or the Senate Committee on FCT could invite the FCDA to come and shed light on this kind of expenditure and let us know whether it is justifiable. I can't sit here without seeing the the scope of work and all of that, and then pass a judgment.
All right.
The committee, relevant committee, will have to invite the FCDA and look at their papers and all of that. I assure Nigerians that project and any project going on in the premises of the National Assembly is not executed by the National Assembly. It's not a baby of the National Assembly.
Okay, we'll continue.
Legislators have no hand in all of that.
We'll continue this in just a moment, so don't go away.
Thank you for staying on with us. Honorable, let me begin with the question of funding. As at this moment, we all know what the minimum wage conversation is going on about when we understand that some states couldn't pay 18,000 naira when that was the minimum wage, couldn't pay 30,000 naira when that was the minimum wage, and now we're asking for state police. From the little analysis that I have done, United Nations recommends 1 policeman to 450 citizens in any particular environment. If we were to calculate the number of policemen Lagos needs, for instance, at 20 million man population, Lagos will be needing about 45,000 policemen on its own. And whatever the minimum wage comes to, that's what they're going to pay. And same for every state in the country. Where do you think, how easily would you think the funding of state police would happen?
Thank you very much for that question. I don't believe that funding state police will be a challenge at all. At the moment, other than salaries that are handled by the federal government, most state police are being funded by the states. Talk about equipments, talk about vehicles, all by the states. So it's not going to be a major shift from the present position. And again, we must realize that the revenue that states are having today is far, 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 far higher than what they've ever had. Our state governors will come to the terms with it to know that most of these funds would have to be channeled towards security. So funding the state police, I don't believe would be an issue at all. They now have increased revenue, added to the fact that before now, they were the ones also funding infrastructure and other capital projects of the police in their respective states. So I don't think it will be a challenge at all. It's just the salaries that they are going to pick up. And of course, there must be an increase in the number of policemen across the country in every state. If you do an analysis right now, there are some states that have more policemen than others. By the time you bring in state police, I think there will be some rationalization such that those states that are underrepresented in the Nigerian police at the moment, when we do state police, such states will up their number, while the states that are overpopulated in the police force will have a way of managing the situation. By the time it comes to an equilibrium, every state will be able to fund it. And you remember that without security, nothing else can be done, no development, no peace. So I believe that the government at the state level will do the needful to fund the police to the best of their abilities.
Honorable, you haven't spoken to the fact that right now there are states who could not afford to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Getting more policemen, taking all of their bills, means that their overhead will increase from what it is currently. Do you think every state has the capacity to fund its state police significantly to reduce the issues of insecurity in their states?
Yeah, with the level of income they get today, before May 29 last year, some states cannot pay their civil servants. That would be understandable. But with the present level, the present income they get from FAC, if there's any state that is not paying their workforce at the moment, I'm going to look for the word to use, because the money is there. It just have to be applied correctly. Now that they have these huge resources coming, I don't see any state that should still complain of not being able to pay the current minimum wage, 30,000 naira monthly. No, they should even increase. They should increase. The 54,000 being discussed right now is even, it should be upped, you know, even for the federal, not to talk about the state. With this level of income, there must be an increase, and all states must be able to fund it.
So let's talk quickly about that minimum wage issue that you just went to. What will you do? First of all, your assessment of this whole conversation around the minimum wage, at a time when the president promised a living wage. There's been conversations about what's the difference between minimum wage and living wage, but beside that, what do you think should be the minimum wage that should go to any worker in Nigeria, federal, state, or even private?
Well, there's hardship across the land at the moment, and what we call minimum wage is not a living wage. Sometimes you want to worry for your domestic staff, how they manage to survive. I will not be able to sit here and then conclude on a figure, because in Abuja, for instance, the cost of living is quite different from Delta State, where I hail from and represent. So to fix a figure from here would be a difficult situation. But there is a general consensus that there is absolute need to increase the minimum wage much higher than what it is right now. It will be a matter of negotiation. One individual cannot bring up a figure and impose it on the vast majority of Nigerians. I would rather encourage the negotiations that are going on. Labour refused 48,000, and yesterday they refused 54. They should continue the discussion. I hear they are meeting again shortly. That negotiation should go on, the federal government, and then the state governors, we understand we're not represented. They should come to the table, so that by the time this negotiation is over, no state will renege on the promise that has been made. There is a need, an urgent need, to pay living wage, so that the current hardship will be ameliorated for the vast majority of Nigerians.
So you also raised an important aspect of this conversation now, Honorable. Do you think the minimum wage should be uniform across the country, given what you said now, that the economies of the different states differ? Do you think it should be a uniform minimum wage across the land?
No, it shouldn't be uniform. Minimum is minimum. Even when we're doing 30, there are a couple of states that were paying above 30. So even when it is increased after this ongoing negotiation, that should be the national minimum. So some states that are doing better and where the cost of living is higher, they should, of course, pay higher than the national minimum. There mustn't be one unitary system of government that fixes a salary scale for the entire country. The cost of living differs depending on where you live. So I don't agree with that uniformity. But the minimum wage must be nationwide. Nobody must go below that level.
So, Honorable, I mean, many of these, we've heard some argument as to seeing how they could take away this minimum wage from the current list and make it concurrent, such that states can pay what they think they can. And Labour, of course, you know Labour's position, but from a lawmaker's perspective, what do you think of that?
I quite agree with you that these negotiations should be decentralized, and going forward, state governments should have that authority to do their own minimum wage in their own states. It should not be something that is exclusive to the federal government and NLC, TUC to conclude on behalf. No. I think I'm grateful that the current Constitutional Review Committee is looking at decentralizing power so that the center should be less attractive. That's the kind of thing you are talking about now, so that state governors should be able to have that authority to bring their own ideas on table to discuss with Labour.
The salaries of the governors, it doesn't matter how much resources your state has. Don't they all earn the same?
Well, there is a federal law that fixes salaries for all political office holders across the country. That is different from minimum wage. Minimum wage is for everybody, the ordinary Nigerian. But when you talk about political office holders, there's a need for some control, for some guide. So I think we should leave that aspect of it.
No, why should we leave it? Because if they all don't earn the same, some that earn like 20 times more than others are earning the same with those other people. So why should we leave it? What if we then say, okay, look, well, since this threshold can stay, but if you're not, based on the resources that come through, the same group that fixes it can refix it.
No,
they don't have to leave it to the states to fix themselves. No, that's not what we're asking.
My personal opinion, the income of political office holders should continue to be fixed by that agency. And it should be nationwide. Everybody should know it. It should be part of...
Yeah, we're not saying that that agency shouldn't fix it.
Yeah.
The agency can continue fixing it, but modify based on the revenue that comes in. You can't say, I can just go and sit there. If I earn 1 naira, I'll be earning the same thing as somebody that earns 30 naira.
So you know if you make less,
then you go and work harder.
No,
you know you're not going to earn as much.
No, you know we have a fundamental problem. Most of the income that goes to the sub-regional governments, the state governments, are from FAC, federal allocation. If it were based on internally generated revenue, then what you are saying now would have some bearing. That you as a governor, as a political officer, you get
FAC doesn't allocate
based
the same
on what you earn,
but FAC
based on what you're able to generate.
Yes, Honorable, we hear you. But they don't allocate the same to all the states.
Yes.
Exactly,
they don't allocate the same to all the states, but all the states have access to this national basket. So
they can have access, but they don't get the same thing across board. That's still the same point.
You know the challenge here?
What is that?
Many of what the states get depend on natural endowments. And I'm from the Niger Delta. I don't want to go personal, you know. So if you look at it in that respect, you will agree that let that aspect of this thing be decided nationally. I think it's in our national interest to do that.
But the common man zone will now say, no, you can't get this, but leave this one.
No, there should be a minimum for the common man across the country, where we know that in the most hard-hit states,
so in that case, then, what's good for the goose is good for the... If you're earning the same, then minimum wage should stay the same across the board. Pay it, since you say you're getting from FAC. Pay from that FAC to all the people. Honorable Francis Waive is the Chairman House Committee on Rules and Business. Thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.